Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We're discussing Beyond Order by Jordan Peterson. And today we're doing rule number 7. So the format is first, everybody gets to talk about what they got from this rule. Just go around. Anybody who has read the rule is welcome to comment. Maybe 3 to 5 minutes, three minutes, ideally. In the middle, we're going to have presentation by Victor. He's got an interesting story from Maps of Meaning. Then we have a set of questions. We're going to go into breakout rooms of about 6 to 8 people with those questions. And then we're going to come back with the biggest question that we have that is on our minds about this rule. So that's the format. All right, we're going to start with Claire. Anybody who wants to share, and I encourage everybody to share, just go ahead and type exclamation mark in chat. Claire, floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. So last week, we discussed Peterson's ask to us that we abandon ideology, that we don't look blindly at some sort of supersedent ideas to structure and make all of our decisions for us. And instead that we have discretion and that we think independently and that we choose wisely. This week, he reminds us really of the importance of choosing at all. Because as he says, the worst decision of all is none. So all those of you who know me have heard me kind of talk about my hippie days living in San Francisco. Before I found Peterson, I was young, I was nihilistic, I was slightly self-destructive, and I was pretty lost. But then again, I was also pretty young, so we'll give me a break there. And I remember very specifically an encounter I had sitting outside in a kind of patio with a stranger at my local watering hole drinking IPAs. And I was telling him about some stress that I had at the time. And it's ironic. And of course, I don't remember what that was, but I was trying to decide between some job or some choice or something. And it was really sort of plaguing me. And I remember him taking everything around us at the restaurant, everything on our table, everything out of his bags, even like bothering the people around them and placing all of these knickknacks on our table. And he said to me, "These are your opportunities." And then he talked me through sort of hypothetically through the rest of my life. And he began to take things off the table, the salt shaker, the ketchup container, all of the beers, his pens, until he sort of arrived metaphorically at the end of my life and there was nothing on the table. And at the time, this was really anxiety producing to me because I thought that these opportunities would just disappear through my life because I got older. And I really realize now that they only disappear because the time shrinks. And because if you fail to take on an opportunity, then we really limit ourselves from any of those that might be unlocked had we chosen one of those salt shakers. We will all face many commitments in a lifetime, and they will keep coming regardless of our stage of life. A romantic partner, a school, a place to live, how to earn a living, how to spend our free time, who to surround ourselves with, who to vote for, how to spend our money. And it's really uncertain whether you might be just as happy had you chosen any of those commitments or the other. And as Peterson says, it's also uncertain whether you might be just as unhappy had you chosen some versus the others. What is certain, though, he says that if you fail to make a commitment, if you fail to really look at your life, to look at it and make specific choices around you about what you want the rest of your life to look like, then you'll be pretty anxious and possibly nihilistic, but certainly unhappy. So how do we make that commitment? First, we have to subjugate ourselves to the rules of the game. Look around at the rules that tradition and society in general and that kind of supersedent morality tell us are important. And then we take all the information we have and all the courage we can muster, and we just make a choice. And we hope for the best, and then we adjust and we pivot that choice as new information presents itself. That choice will not lock us up. but rather that one thing, as he says in the end of the chapter, that one thing developed properly is not only the disciplined entity formed by sacrifice, commitment, and concentration, it is that which creates, destroys, and transforms discipline itself, civilization itself, by expressing its unity of personality and society. It is the very word of truth, upon whose function all habitable order, wretched out of chaos, eternally depends. Work as hard as you possibly can at least one thing and see what happens. Thank you, Shrikant.
Wow. Thanks, Claire. That was great. Don't know where to begin, but this is just great. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Jyoti. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark to talk about what did you get from this chapter? What's the most important thing you got? Joe.
I totally didn't want to follow Claire after that. That was really, really awesome. So really well said. From this particular chapter, I really got the feeling, it reminded me of a previous series that we had worked on was Outwitting the Devil, and the idea of drifting and allowing ourselves to be undisciplined. And one of the things that the two major points that I walked away with is the developing habits and behaviors that allow us to integrate not only with society, but also to be successful, so that we're able to work well with others. And some of these disciplines in tempering our desires is really kind of critical in order to fully realize our potential. So in one particular, at one particular point in time, he wrote, the properly functioning and integrated individual tempers the desire of the present with the necessities of the future, including the necessity of playing well with others. And by tempering our desires, we can overcome our disruptive drives that are actually inhibiting us from actually producing and being successful and taking on things that we would not otherwise take on, taking on additional responsibilities in order to be successful. And this also prevents us from drifting. This also, in addition to that, I feel like it prevents us from not only drifting, but it helps us persevere through some of the more difficult periods of times in our lives if we're disciplined in the way we're approaching our everyday activities. And this leads to something he called a controlled competitiveness that allows us to play in the game that he referred to on a regular basis. And that was, I thought, a very important point as well. But this helps us transform ourselves in what he called our sub-personalities into like committed careers and to meaningful relationships. And without this discipline, we kind of divulge into or divert into a chaotic state. So those are my immediate takeaways, is the importance of discipline and just how it relates to chaos. And I'll leave it there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Claire, towards the end, you said something really interesting. I'm trying to capture the words and can't quite do that. You're talking about that actually this is what it takes to create value. But it was said in really beautiful words. Can you repeat those words? Claire, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm thinking. Yeah, I will not be able to say it as eloquently as I did, but
go ahead.
I think it comes back to like on page 199, 191, he talks about this idea of like Christianity and Buddhism and all the religions, they only were developed out of, they could have been interchangeable, right? They were just the sum of the value structures that came behind them. And that doesn't make them the best one, but it doesn't say that you shouldn't have chosen one. And so there is this kind of like the best of the values are those that come forward, and being doubtful about which game to choose isn't wrong, but not choosing is sort of is an absence of morality in itself.
Excellent. Thank you, Claire, and thanks, Joe. Next up is going to be Jyoti, followed by Victor. Jyoti.
A little bit nervous today. Claire, and then Joe, and then it's my turn. Okay, I was foolish enough to say after Claire that I'll do it. That was not so smart. Joe has almost said what I was going to say. I was quite impressed with Peterson when he brought in the child development. He said the concentration, the discipline enables us to become concentrated on one thing that we have to do in life. And that begins quite early in life. At the age of 4, the child starts to socialize in his or her way. And the mother intervenes. And when the mother intervenes, she teaches him, or he learns from the mother to socialize on his terms and cooperate with his peers. So having said that, I'm just going to read a few lines that really got my attention. That was when a child is self-directed experience is interrupted by the emergence of instinctual system. When the child is hungry, angry, tired, or cold, the good parent steps in, solving the problem, disrupting the child's fragile unity, or better yet, teaching the child to solve the problem himself. When the latter process has been completed with sufficient thoroughness, the child is ready to join the social world. This must happen by the age of 4, or it may never happen. A child must be sufficiently self-organizing to be desirable to his or her peers by the age of 4, or risk permanent social ostracism. A child who is still having temper tantrums by the age runs precisely that risk. The process of integration is furthered by the peers, friends for the child well trained or fortunate enough to be accepted. And I'm going to skip everything and I'm going to read even more pertinent lines. Once a child's world has forced the child to integrate his multiple sub-personalities, he can play with others. After that, he should be ready to engage in the more serious games that make up jobs or professions with their highly structured expectations, skills, and rules. He must learn those as well when older, the dance of sexes. He must integrate his socialized personality with that of another, so that the couple he makes with that other can exist together peacefully, productively within the society over a long term, while maintaining voluntary willingness to do so. This is a dual process, and this is very important here. This is a dual process of psychological and social integration that accompanies apprenticeship, all associated with the outsourcing of sanity. Adherence to this process will make him a socially sophisticated, productive, and psychologically healthy adult, capable of true reciprocity, and perhaps the temporary suspension of the demand of reciprocity necessary to raise children. But the story of integration and socialization does not end here. This is because two things are happening at once. During the apprenticeship, worthy of the name, just as learning to play a game and learning to be a good sport happen at the same time while playing, initially the apprentice must become a servant of traditions, of structure, and of dogma, just as a child who wants to play must follow the rules of the game. At its best, this servitude means grateful alliance in one form or another with the institutions typically considered patriarchal. Apprenticeship means here and pressure as new workmen are tried by their peers, or articling law students are tried by their employers, as medical residents are tried by the physicians, nurses, and patients. The goal of this heat and pressure is subordination of the undeveloped personality, by no means individual, at that point, to a single path for the purpose of transformation from undisciplined beginner to an accomplished master.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. It was great. I just want to reread the paragraph that Claire read. I mean, I always like, both in this book as well as the previous book, the ending of all the chapters where he brings everything together. So I'm just rereading what Claire read. That one thing developed properly is not only the disciplined entity formed by sacrifice, commitment, and concentration. It is that which creates, destroys, and transforms discipline itself, civilization itself, by expressing its unity of personality and society. It is the very word of truth, upon whose function all habitable order, wrenched out of chaos, eternally depends. Just he is so good in these final paragraphs. I always love them. Next up is going to be Jean, John, and Victor. Jean.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah. So yeah, I read this chapter and I really like it. But I not totally agree with what he said. As much as the mayor, Jordan Peterson, I think he's a little bit too extreme. You know, he's totally in the system. He's type of guy, like hierarchy, we have to get in the game, have to be successful. I don't believe you have to be figure everything out at 4 years old. I don't think I figured out at 4 years old at all. And I don't think that will determine your life. I don't believe that at all. I think at any type of age, you have the chance to transform your life. That's why I like the book flow I'm reading right now. I think it's all to integrate what Jordan Peterson talking about, order and chaos. You know, so, but I guess one thing I learned, I think I mentioned that at discussion before, like there's so many potentials of us. Like sometimes it's very hard to decide what to choose. And I think what he said is really makes sense to me. It's like, no matter what you choose something. So you can start with something, then you perfect your skill, you develop your personality, learn all the things you need to learn. Even then you switch your field, you have something already. Instead of like wondering, making no choice, then you're wasting your time. So it really makes sense to me now. So it's like, there's so many potentials in us. But just like design, there's a deadline. You have to pick something and you have to develop something, even though you may not get the perfect design, but you do the best you can with your capacity. I think that's better than nothing, you know? So I think that really solved my puzzles. I was like, oh, there's so much I can do. What should I do? So it's answer my question, just do something, at least something you don't hate as you enjoy. Maybe it's not the things you totally love, because we never know what is the perfection is always in the dream or the God or whatever. So that's why we create God, to encompass the perfection, because it won't happen in real life. You know, we can just be closer to it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jean. Great comments. Claire, you had a comment?
Yeah, it's kind of unrelated. Can I just jump in?
Go ahead.
Skip the line. Okay. Okay. There's paragraph just blew my mind at the beginning of the thing 182, because it's the second paragraph. It was for such reasons that archaic people, because in this one paragraph, he basically does the whole personality series, and it's kind of massive meaning that he goes through and he says, archaic people, you know, were kind of haunted by what they perceived to be ghosts. And we talked about that being like Eros was love, or war was Mars, that like these instinctual feelings, or even as Gyoti's talking about the childlike emotions, you know, the archaic people said, okay, there were these ghosts or demons or spirits or gods. And then boom, a sentence later, since the time of the psychoanalysts, they then gave us impulses and emotions and motivational states. And then, but, you know, we really need to center our neurological structure, and he goes into biology, and then finally saying, you know, what's the answer? It's this sort of integration, the resilience and strength of a united spirit is kind of the way to go. So I just wanted to highlight that, because we've all kind of been through personality, and we did massive meaning. That I think we're seeing that a lot in this book is chapters of just like really immaculate summarization crazy ideas that unless you had read them in such depth before, you don't see it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Claire. That was great. Next up is going to be John and Victor. John.
Good evening, everybody. My biggest personal takeaway was really just excitement because I'm starting a clinical psychology PhD program next year, and he made it seem like it was going to be a pretty fun time. So that's great. But another thing that I've been thinking of that is more shareable is just how the possibility of working on one thing as hard as you can, limiting your ability to flourish in a more multifaceted way in your life. And, Peterson has said things before about, you don't want to necessarily be the woman at age 31 who's working 80 hours a week at a law firm, because there are more important things in life, and he even, lists self-evident commitments that have enduring value: character, love, family, friendship, career, and perhaps in that order. So I was thinking about, the possibility of working as hard as I possibly could in one area, say my career. And I was thinking about, what that might look like in terms of a time commitment. And in that way, I was thinking about maybe what I would have to sacrifice in order to actually work as hard as I possibly could at advancing in one thing like my career. So I think that I've sort of been framing it more with something different that he said in the chapter, which is, ranking value requires the ranking of options and sacrifice of the lower to the higher. So I would never want to sacrifice my romantic relationship, my family, my physical health, or any of that to one superseding value of working as hard as I could at my career, say, for 60 or 70 hours a week, even though I could do that, right? I could work for 60 or 70 hours a week, in my field and never run out of work. There's always work to be found. So I guess I was just kind of framing it in terms of setting up a certain amount of time in your life for each of the things based on the level of importance that they have in your life, and then working as hard as you can within that framework at each of those things. And obviously they should be non-contradictory, as he said. But yeah, that's what I took.
John, that's great, man. I really like the idea. I think it's far more integrated way of looking at it. I think what he's saying is that at least do one thing, and see what it can do for you. But I think your approach makes perfect sense. Victor. So it's going to be Victor, Pegor, and Mike. Victor, go ahead.
All right. So yeah, before I go ahead into the presentation, I'd like to give my thoughts on it. So in this chapter, Peterson talks about a few things: apprenticeship, mastery, prohibition, and exhortation. Although those are the words that were not used, but they were used in the book Maps of Meaning, and this was in the chapter Enculturation and Apprenticeship. And he also talks about discipline and freedom, dogma and spirit. So he makes a very clear distinction between these characters and mentions why these are important. And talking about apprenticeship and mastery, he talks about how even our education system is designed such a way that we, at the pinnacle of our education, and when we are disciplined in a particular discipline, and when we get to PhDs stage, and we have to give our thesis to graduate, meaning that all the education that has taken up until now, that is one thing, and now that you are a master of it, you will have to produce something new. So that's how you become the master of that particular discipline. And that is going into the idea of prohibition and exhortation. It gives the example from Old Testament and New Testament. And here it gives the examples of all the rules that are mentioned in the Old Testament and a couple of rules in the New Testament. The clear difference is in the first in the Old Testament, all the rules start with "thou shalt not." In a way, it is making us limit to a particular thing and to follow a set of disciplines and a set of principles. And coming to the New Testament, the only two principles that Jesus proclaims start with "thou shalt." That is the idea of exhortation. Now that you have mastered the idea of prohibition, which is disciplining yourself, now you can go ahead and do something that you are a master of. And talking about the same thing, he talks about dogma and spirit. And with dogma, it's more of the idea of very restrained rules. And any person to get to the idea, to get to a better place, will have to go through that restricted discipline, and only then they can produce something. And when someone becomes the master of that dogma, at that point, dogma serves the master, not he or she serving the dogma. And he doesn't stop there, which is a very good thing, because as time passes, whatever the new thing that comes out will eventually become old, and even that becomes a dogma, which is a very good point. And coming to tonight's presentation of a story, this is taken from Maps of Meaning. And it is a story, it's called Jolly Tailor Who Becomes King. It fits well with our theme, and this is a Polish folk tale. So this has been told in Polish culture for hundreds of years. So here it goes. This is how it goes. Once there was a man named Netechka, who is a simple tailor. He goes from town to town to fix clothes and make his earning. One day, while he was on his way, he sees a wounded gypsy and helps her. In return, the gypsy provides him with some information. The information, she informs him that if he goes westward, he will become a king. And he goes on to westward. And he has a friend named, and it's called Scarecrow, and he goes on with her. So they travel westward and they arrive at a town called Pakano. To their astonishment, they find the rain pours down only on this town. All around this town is nice and shiny. The Scarecrow, the friend, it says, I won't go there because my hat will get wet. And even the tailor himself, he says, even I don't wish to become a king of such a wet kingdom. Right then, the townspeople pop up and they ask the new strangers, dear sirs, maybe you can help us. The deluge and destruction threatened us. Our king died a week ago, and since that time, a terrible rain has come down upon us. And we can't even make fires in our houses because so much water runs through our chimneys. We will perish, honorable sirs. Oh, that's very bad, says Taylor. Yeah, it's very bad. And the most sorry for the late king's daughter because she can't stop crying. And do you know what's the immeasurable reward the princess promised to the one who stops the rain? She promised to marry him, and then he will become the king. Well, now we see the story, the plot of the story, right? So he is a humble tailor, and he helps others, and although he's outwardly humble, he is outwardly humble, and he's willing to take risks, and now he has a capacity to become a king. Now he ponders the situation for 3 long days. Finally, he's granted a revelation. I know where the rain comes from, he says. It comes from the sky. Well, then his scarecrow says, yeah, I know that too. No rain comes from the bottom. But then he goes on to say, but tell me, how long has it rained just on this town? They say since the king died. You see, now I know everything. The king was so great and mighty that he has died and he went to heaven. He made a huge hole in the sky. Well, then Scarecrow tends to agree with what he was getting at. Techka orders town people to get all the ladders in the town so that he can go up into the sky and then he can mend the hole. He ascends the ladder with hundreds of needles threading into one. Then when Netechka goes to the very top, he saw that there was a huge hole in the sky. The hole is as big as the town. A torn piece of sky hung down, and through this hole, the water poured. So he went to work and sewed for 2 days. His fingers grew stiff and he became very tired, but he did not stop. When he had finished sewing, he pressed out the sky with the iron. He was exhausted towards the end. And when he came down, once more the sun shone over Pocono. Townspeople were really happy. And then he gets married to the daughter of the king. And people go, long live King Netechka, long live. But the idea is if we go ahead and take opportunities, it's only a good thing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Victor. All right. Always appreciate your presentations. They add a completely new angle to our discussions. So thank you. Next up is going to be Pegor, followed by Mike. Pegor.
Yeah, I don't know, while everyone was talking, two thoughts came to my mind. First, the quote, Jack of all trades, master of none. I don't know why, but it just popped into my thoughts. And the second thing that came into my mind is I've heard this notion that you will only get, in the Christian context, of that you will only get true freedom when you submit to God. And I can't help but connect this to that in some sense, God is the ultimate discipline or something, that if you submit yourself to it, then it will unlock a whole bunch of stuff for you. So that's it, basically.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Pegor. Next up is Mike. Mike, what did you learn from this chapter in 3 minutes?
I'll give you 30 seconds and then
Wonderful.
You can decide if you want more.
All right. Deal.
I agree with what everybody else has said, and it fits with what many people have said, including me, in some of his other rules. He does not take into account the nonlinearities and multi-factor cases of the problem. Work as hard as you possibly can has got an honorable mention in the Bible, religion. It's got an honorable mention in Aesop's Fables, and it's got honorable mention in Alice in Wonderland. I've got to run as fast as I can just to stay even. To get anywhere, I got to run twice as fast. And the nonlinearities are what goes on with many of the things that Peterson has said, and kind of explains why he's had a lot of trouble in his academic career too. Now, I submit that work as hard as you can is one of the myths of the workplace. that myth is broken. The way we think about work is broken. And why do we work? We can say we work for money. Society wants us to work. But the concept of money is broken too, because that modern monetary theory has described how how money is created, how Bitcoin is created, and that concept has changed a great deal in our society. I've used my 30 seconds. You want me to go on?
Let me just ask you a question. So what do you think is the alternative to working as hard? How do you make things happen? What is the core thing that you need to do in order to add value to your life and to lives of others?
Well, there are people who have conflicting theories as to how we need to rework society and money and work to do that. That was what was discussed in the last election, actually.
Okay, let's not.
Without going into that detail, the concept of what we're doing now, of how we're, even though we have $30 trillion of debt and $300 trillion of unfunded liability, we can create
Okay.
enough money to fix all our problems right now, and we're doing it.
All right.
Now, what do we do about work specifically? There are some detailed theories of how we rearrange the concept of work, society, and money to take into account the singularities that are about to happen, that are happening
All right.
in automation.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. It was
Yeah.
3 minutes. Yeah, it was 3 minutes and 45 seconds. All right. Next up, let's see. Does anybody else want to share their takeaways? Let's see. It's going to be Max followed by Brian. Max.
Hello. Yeah, I think I can't really expound on it as far as like within the rule. I think everyone's done a really good job of exploring that. There was one part that I heard as far as I think there's this that was relevant to another book I read. I read this book, The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. And in that, he talks about how you can't really make a bad decision in life because for you to know that it's a bad decision, you would have to live multiple times. So nothing is like right or wrong if there's no comparison to it. Because you only live once, then everything you do is kind of like the best case scenario to it. So there's no like kind of scale. I think a lot of people do mess that up. And I think that Jordan really addressed that in this chapter when he's talking about it, because some people do get that kind of like that analysis paralysis where they're like constantly trying to think like what's this, or and then they regret after they do stuff like, oh, if I would done this, my life could have been this thing or that thing. But yeah, I think the best way to do it is like just pick a hand and then just play that hand and just dance with the girl that you came with, basically.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Max. Let's see. The next one up is Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Oh, so I agree with what's been said. I especially liked what our budding clinical psychologist said about basically for me maintaining balance. Except for the character that was highlighted by Jordan Peterson, everything else involved more than one person: the career, family, friends. So I think also the interpersonal connections are very important in this. The only thing I would add, maybe a different dimension to it, or a different way of looking at it, is the possibility of expression. that what we're looking at here and what we're looking for is expressing ourselves, very much like language. First, we learn the sounds and the words and the sentences. Eventually, and then we read what others write, but then eventually we start writing ourselves. And that's this movement from apprentice to master, and then to a word that I think is missing in the chapter, virtuosity. That's the spirit dimension, where there's more creativity and freedom of expression.
Wonderful, wonderful, folks. All right, so it's time to go for breakout rooms. And what we're going to discuss is that we're going to discuss this issue in great amount of detail. So Pegor, could you go ahead and type in the question, or just cut and paste the question again while I set up the breakout rooms? Give me a second here. Okay, very good. Give me a second. I'm trying to get the breakout rooms set up. Give me a second. Claire, you want to say something while I set up the breakout rooms?
Of course I do. One thing that just popped up for me is he highlights the difference between quitting and failing. And I thought that was interesting, that people suffer if they quit before completing an undergraduate degree or the study of a trade. And this means quit, not fail, although the two can be difficult to distinguish. Sometimes people fail because they just cannot manage the job. And then he goes on to say a bunch of different reasons that people might fail. And sometimes the match between the person and a choice is so poor that even commitment will not suffice. But very often, failure is the consequence of insufficient single-mindedness, elaborate but pointless rationalization, or rejection of responsibility. So I thought that kind of balance between quitting and failing because you just weren't matched up and you gave it your best and you tried, versus failing because you didn't really commit, right? You didn't really single-mindedly do that. And I think I often will do that I'll commit to something, but I still have a foot out the door. I still have a foot, being nihilistic or judging the actions of others and not really being all in. So there is this kind of skin in the game element, I think, of choosing one thing, that if you choose it, you have to be willing to fail and kind of pay the price.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
I can keep going. You ready?
I'm ready. So folks, I'm going to start the breakout rooms. The breakout rooms are going to last for 20 minutes. And after which we're going to be back here automatically. When you come back, try to come back with the best question that you can possibly come up with. Okay, so that's the goal, and then we will do a lightning round. So I'll take in all the questions, I'll organize them, and we'll go with question one by one, and then everybody gets to answer the question. I'm starting the breakout rooms now. Welcome back, everybody. All right. Okay, so it's time for the big questions. So go ahead and type in chat the biggest question that you have about this chapter, about this general topic. We'll collect all the questions, and then we'll go ahead and do a lightning round of trying to answer them. Right, folks? So it's going to be Jean, followed by Joe. Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, we have a discussion. We actually talk a lot about discipline. Mm-hmm. So actually I have a hard time with this word discipline, because I think I'm not a very disciplined person. So, but luckily I don't have to be very disciplined with my job because I love it. So my question is, like, do I understand word incorrectly? Because I think if you love to do it, so it's in discipline, it's like you have a purpose, you want to go somewhere, but you don't want to do it. So then you have to do it because it's aligned with your purpose. But if you change your mind, or you like to do it, then you don't have to discipline, right? You don't have to discipline ourselves to play.
Sure.
Because
I will put it as what is the relationship between discipline and love? What is it? Relationship between you loving something and disciplining? Is it mutually exclusive? Okay, very good. Excellent. Next question is from Joe, Jyoti, Nick. Joe.
How do you ensure commitment doesn't turn into obsession?
Very good. Do you ensure commitment doesn't turn into obsession? Excellent. Next up is Jyoti.
Yeah, I don't know how to form it in the question form. Maybe you will help me, Shrikant. Peterson says work hard and do one thing. And my question is, when you work very hard and you are focused on one thing almost all your life, then you forget there are other parts of you, other potential. You have the potential, and that you are never able to realize that all your life because you put all your energy in one thing and you did well in one thing. But there are other passions you have that never got. So I don't know how to put it in a question form.
Excellent. So we'll put it as, does commitment to one thing impair your potential in other dimensions?
Yeah.
Okay. Impair potential in other dimensions. Thank you. Next up is going to be Nick. Nick, go ahead.
Yep. So my question was, when does the apprentice, who is the servant of tradition, know when to graduate to the master, when you can start challenging some of those, what do you say? You know, when you're allowed to kind of start challenging that tradition and structure that you kind of take for that you have to accept when you're still the apprentice.
Wonderful. Excellent question. So when does apprentice graduate to be a master?
Wonderful. Yeah, and start challenging that tradition.
Excellent. Next up is Brian. Brian, go ahead. Would you like to unmute and ask the question? Because some people don't read the chat, you know.
Right. So I think in our group, it was with Gene was in the same group. We were going around, different people had very different feelings about the word discipline. Some people liked commitment, some liked mastery, some liked discipline. So, but everybody kind of had the same understanding, but explained it in a different context. But the interesting thing was that I thought was, as this concept was defined by each person, it had some relationship to freedom. It somehow magnified their freedom.
Mm-hmm.
As I guess as in the OODA loop would be maximizing your, what is it? Scope of independent action.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Okay, so what is the relationship between discipline and achieving freedom? Discipline and freedom? Very good. Excellent. Next up is going to be Kevin. Sorry, Claire. Claire, go ahead.
My question was just, how do you choose which thing to work on?
Okay, excellent. How do you choose what to work on? Okay. Thank you. Next up is Kevin.
Thank you. My question is regarding to the cynical. It's like this. Does cynicism play a role in failure after hard working one thing? So the following question: what kind of one obtain needed care after the hard working still doesn't work?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Could you repeat that, please?
I kind of posted to the chat, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Ilya, you had a question?
I did not.
Okay.
I agree with the freedom and mastery. I hope to tackle that one together.
Sure, wonderful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Laura. Laura, what's your question?
Can we really only do one thing? I mean, look at even last night when we
Got it.
talked about neuroscience? How many different ways was it discussed within neurobiology? It just so.
Sure.
Yeah,
Is it
that's what
is
I-
it right to focus on just one thing, right?
Or is it possible just to
Okay.
have one
Is it
thing?
okay? Is it possible to have just one thing? Okay. Next up, let me see. I'm going to read Kevin's question. Does cynicism play a role in failure after hard work on one thing? What can one obtain needed care? Okay. Victor. Kevin, I still don't understand your question. So if you could clarify it and put it in another way, I'll take it. Victor, go ahead.
Is the word discipline a noun, a verb, or an adjective?
Oh, very nice. Is it a discipline, a noun, verb, or an adjective? Very good.
I meant the adjective.
Adjective. Oh, sorry, adjective.
Or all of them.
Okay, very good. Very good. Okay. All right, folks. So let's go ahead and try to answer all these questions. Okay, so let's start with Victor's question. Is discipline a noun, verb, or adjective? So remember, Lowell, did you have a question?
No, I did not.
Okay. All right. So what we do is that when if you want to speak, just go ahead and type exclamation mark in chat and I'll call on you. Okay. So I'm going to keep the sound quality as good. So I'll keep everybody muted. Anybody who wants to talk, just go ahead and type a exclamation mark. I'll call on you and then go ahead and, okay. So Lowell, you wanted to say something about is discipline. So the question on the table right now, only one question. Is discipline a noun, verb, or adjective? Primarily, how do you think of it?
It's all three. Discipline, for example, the discipline of ballet dancing, that's a noun.
Mm-hmm.
To discipline oneself is a verb. And to say that the behavior was disciplined behavior, that's an adjective. So it functions in all three areas.
Very good. So L says all three. Ilya says verb. So fundamentally, see, this is true from like in English, every word has versions, which are nouns, adjectives, and verb. Many words are like that.
Yes.
So now the question is, what is it fundamentally? Victor, do you want to elaborate on the question? It's clear that there are all three. Are you asking something more specific than that?
Yeah, meaning what's the thing that's closest to us? Meaning I can see it as a verb and we can also see it as a noun because there are so many disciplines that we try to master. But
oh, that's a completely different concept. I don't think that is the concept that we are talking about. Yeah. The concept that we're talking about is clearly fundamentally a verb of basically how you're doing things. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. So we'll go to the next one. We'll start now in chronological order, starting with Jean's question. So Jean's questions are very, very interesting. Is discipline an issue only with things that you don't want to do? If you really, really want to do something, if you really love something, is the concept of discipline a valid concept? So do you need discipline in order to do things that you really love? Or is it a concept applicable only when you're trying to make yourself do something which you do not like? Okay, so that's the question. So it's the answers from Becky, Stefan, and Lowell.
So I think that with discipline, there is that connotation of like you have it when there's a lack of passion. And so on a spectrum, there's pure passion, then there's pure discipline. And passion kind of like ebbs and flows, and when you're at a valley and you're lacking that passion, discipline will carry you through. So that's how I see it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Becky. Next up is Stefan.
Yeah, so I think that just because you love something doesn't mean that you have to enjoy it every single time that you work on it. So, I mean, for example, I think everybody who has kids,
yes,
they might sometimes get really pissed off at their kids and they wish they never had kids, but they still love them and they'll still put in the work to make them better and better people. And you could apply this to any passion project you'll ever come up with. There's not going to be anything that you love 100% through and through all the time. Even if you get your dream job, there's going to be some aspect of it that you're kind of like, or some days you're like, I really don't want to do this shit, but you'll still do it because you like it overall.
Wonderful. Excellent point, Stefan. Fantastic. Next up is Lowell, Al, and Jyoti. Lowell.
I think of performing artists as people who love what they do, and they love it with tremendous passion. Opera singers love being opera singers. Dancers love being dancers. But the one thing that is true about all performing artists is they are incredibly disciplined about their instrument, about their practice, about what they do, because without that discipline, without practicing those notes every single day, they can't do the thing they love.
Beautiful. Excellent point. Excellent. Next up is, so what you're saying is that, you know, I mean, both of you made great points, you know, and Becky too. So what you're saying is that you need the discipline of continual hard work to make things happen, to produce that. And what Stefano was saying is that there are going to be bumps in the way. There are going to be aspects of things that you don't like to do that you would have to do. Next up is going to be Elle, Jyoti, Nick, Laura, Dave, Joe, and Ilya. Elle.
Well, thank you. Yes, certainly if you love something and you have a high degree of commitment toward it, you still need discipline in your life because you have other things you have to do as well. It's like maybe a pie chart there, and you still need the discipline in order to do what you love and maintain all of your other commitments. So I think that was pretty well said, and thank you.
Thank you, Elle. Next up is Jyoti and Nick. Jyoti.
Yeah, I agree with those who are saying that you do need discipline, whether it's a good or a bad thing, I mean, a passionate thing or not a passionate thing, because you have a meandering mind that always drifts you away from your thing that you are doing, the goal that you are trying to achieve, and the one that you really like to achieve. But then there are other areas that you want to also, you know, look into, peek into, and say, well, maybe I should do something about that too. But then you have to be disciplined because you have chosen a field that you want to be an expert in. So you have to discipline your mind in that particular area that you have chosen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is Nick and Laura. Nick.
I'd say discipline is inversely correlated with motivation. So you need discipline to carry you through, as you know, as I've established. You need the discipline to get very good craft. Sometimes motivation will go up and down just with anything, and discipline helps carry you through those periods of low motivation when you need to still be performing at a certain level to achieve that level of competence in that area.
Wonderful. Next up is Laura and Dave. Laura.
Well, I think when you are disciplined, it goes with setting goals for yourself. And I think people do that even when they're obsessed with things, because they want to achieve a certain amount in a certain amount of time, and that requires discipline. So I think that goes hand in hand.
Thank you. Next up is Dave, followed by Joe. Dave.
Yeah, I want to pursue Lowell's thought of being a ballet dancer. And it gets into this discipline versus freedom idea. I could go out in my backyard and I can be a heck of a ballet dancer. And I may want to do it a way no one has ever done it before.
Probably would be.
Be freedom, but I'm probably going to have to fit in society. So I may have to go up to Seattle, or heck, I'm not going to go to New York, but go somewhere where there's an established ballet company and audition and see if I can become part of something. And sometimes we give up some freedom to pursue something. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Dave. Next up is going to be Joe and Ilya. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, even if you enjoy what you're doing, there's some degree of sacrifice that has to go into it, and there are value trade-offs. So the bottom line is that yes, absolutely, you need discipline in order to focus on your goal, and in order to also get through. There are parts of things, and I forget who had said it. The idea of having children is a perfect example. Where it's not always going to be perfect, but it could be exactly what you want. So I think you're going to have an idea of, discipline in order to get to your goal. So I see that as an absolute.
Excellent. Next up is going to be Ilya, followed by Brian. Ilya.
Yeah, sorry, I just had it on mute. Yeah, so some people were saying that discipline was there's sacrifices, which I didn't exactly agree with because of something that I said earlier in the breakoff group, which was that discipline is a product of lack of freedom, kind of. It's a constraint that you have to deal with. It's a discomfort that you have to get used to in order to survive by playing by the rules or playing into someone else's I want to say gimmick but just whatever they're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if one is able or choosing to avoid that, playing into someone else's life plan, then you have to endeavor onto a creative path of self-discovery and build confidence in what you do enjoy, and then whatever. Like for me, it's storyboarding.
Mm-hmm. Can you wrap it up? We're trying to keep the answers short so we can go through these 12 questions that we have.
Right. So yeah, just if it seems like a discipline,
mm-hmm.
then if it seems like you have to do it, then it's probably because someone else is responsible for the outcome.
Got it. Thank you. Next up is going to be Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that you do need discipline, and even if people are passionate about something, if they don't have the discipline to develop the skills and to follow through with it, then they're never going to really master that. And a very quick story, I was in a group project once, and the first day this one guy got up and he said, what we need to do is blah 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 blah, and it sounded great. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to be so easy. This guy just has everything figured out. And the guy never came to another meeting till like the last meeting before we had to present the project. So, I think you need discipline, even if there is passion.
Got it. Excellent point. All right, folks. The next question is, how do you ensure that your commitment does not become an obsession? How do you make sure that your commitment doesn't become an obsession? If you'd like to answer it, go ahead and type by exclamation mark.
I have to go back and see what happened to the fan.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
It's going to be, let's see, Jyoti, Jean, and Claire. Jyoti.
If it is not affecting your health in any way, it's not driving you to start drinking and getting up the odd hours of morning and night and pursuing it, you are not resting, you're not able to sleep, then you need to just slow down on it. Then you know you are obsessing over it.
Wonderful.
Because
So
those are negative things.
excellent. So I'll add another aspect to it. How do you tell whether a commitment is becoming an obsession or is becoming something unhealthy or something like that? Something is going wrong with the commitment. Next up is going to be Jean, Claire, Joe, and Dee. Jean.
Yeah, I think actually I'm reading the book Flow. I get so inspired, and they mention about this obsession. We get into the flow. Sometimes people easily get obsessed. I think the important thing is balancing. I actually found that for myself, my kids help me to balance. If I enjoy work so much, I could work forever, but then I have to cook for them. I have to do all these things. They keep me balanced, and I keep myself balanced. That's one way too. So I think if you balance yourself, they are not obsessed.
Wonderful. Great point, Jean. Thank you. Next up is Claire and Joe. Claire.
So Pegor brought up God earlier, and I think that the last part of this chapter about the New and Old Testament is interesting. That in this New Testament passage, Jesus really breaks it down to the Lord is our God is the highest one, and then love your neighbor. And I think that first one being, Peterson says, a personality that's integrated is guided by or imitating the highest possible ideal, precisely that ideal that constitutes whatever common element of moral makes all the rules good, just, and necessary. That idea is something singular to the one Lord. So like religion aside, there is this supersedent goal that should be above all of us. That is that it's the rule that makes all the rules worth playing, right? The game that makes the game sustainable. And if what you're pursuing is jeopardizing that, then you really need to stop and take a think about it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Claire. Next up is going to be Joe and Dee. Joe.
I think there are a couple things here. Is that the one thing that actually is when it starts to compromise other values that you have, where, let's just say you have a family and that's one of your values, and you start to compromise and you don't see your family anymore, and it's a purely obsession. The other is when you start to think the ends justify the means in order to achieve your goal. I think that's where you're starting to become an obsession too. You're violating certain ethical principles that you would never otherwise go against. And I'll just leave it with those two.
Excellent point, Joe. Next up is going to be Dee, followed by Brian. Dee.
Yeah, I agree with Joe and with Jyoti that it becomes an obsession to the exclusion of all other things in your life. So if you forget what other things are relevant to your life, then it's like people who have bulimia. They're obsessed about their weight. So, but they're doing it and it's harming them. It's harming them physically as well as mentally and socially. So you're losing the aspects of integrating other aspects of your life. That's when it becomes an obsession.
Excellent. Thank you, Dee. Like the way in which you put it. Next up is going to be Brian, followed by Kevin. Brian. Brian, you need to unmute.
Although Jean said this, basically balance, and what Joe said, looking at other aspects of your life. So if like your career is precluding having friendships and being with your family and getting exercise, then it's an obsession. And if anything is that, then it's an obsession. You need to have balance.
Excellent. Next up is Kevin, followed by Lowell. Kevin.
I got two answers. I see the discipline needs a break. And the second is also find the second discipline.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Next up is Lowell, followed by Mike.
To me, a commitment is an agreement that you make between yourself and someone else or some other thing that is outside of you. When you get married, you make a commitment to your wife. When you sign a contract, you're making a commitment to the other signers of the contract. It's a promise that you make. That's what commitments are. They are promises. An obsession is not a promise. An obsession is something that is totally inner focused. It's all about you. It's not about going out there and doing something for somebody else. So that to me is the difference between obsession and commitment.
Excellent, excellent point. I think the point about internal versus external, that's beautiful. Okay, next up is going to be Mike. So Mike, only about how do you ensure commitment, ensure that the commitment does not become an obsession. 30 seconds, sir.
Not even 30 seconds. There's a fine line between success and failure. Everything is on the table. You need to end up with a net positive. And you know, if you break some of the rules, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission often comes into effect.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Next up is going to be Ilya. Ilya, please be brief. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't get the girl's name, but in tandem with the second last answer, the commitment. First of all, I'm assuming that it's like a purpose that you're committed to, but if it isn't, then it could become an obsession because of, I don't know. Basically, what I want to say is that it's hard to put, but I've actually been writing about it recently.
Okay, we can come back to you. If you have at another point, you can write it down. That's much more effective. Okay, thank you.
I got a pen. Yeah.
Thank you. Next up is going to be next question. Let me see. This is Jyoti's question. Does a single-minded pursuit of one objective impair your potential in pursuing other possibilities? Are you losing out? Are you losing out on possibilities by pursuing one thing? Joe.
I think absolutely. I mean, the idea is that you can extract generalized principles by having multiple pursuits and apply them to find out where you really like and what's the best fit for you and what career path. The odds of you actually picking what you want to do early on in life and following that path are very low. So, I mean, the idea that you're going to just know what you want to do at 18 years old is has proven to be false, actually. So that people really don't know, and they answer questions differently throughout their lives. So I think you limit yourself by only focusing on one thing and not understanding how that all these disciplines kind of the interrelationships between disciplines.
Excellent point. Comprehensivism. Next up is John.
John? Yeah, I'm here. I think, yes, it definitely excludes your ability to become a master at multiple things. But I think that if you structure your life in a certain way and allow time to, pursue different habits and different passions throughout your life, you can still, make a meaningful impact. Like you can still, become great in your career and also learn a musical instrument on the side at age 30 or something.
Excellent point. I really liked your point earlier about kind of multiple values that you have. I also think in that way, there are kind of different aspects of your life. You kind of have to have your health. You kind of have to have your kind of family and friends. You kind of have to have your career. You kind of have to have your kind of growth, kind of intellectual growth, and all of them have to work to some extent for any of them to work. So there is that of kind of, making sure that all of them are kind of operative. Next up is going to be Lowell, Kevin, Jean, Laura, and Dee. So Lowell.
I look at my son as somebody who was very disciplined. He was a Olympic weightlifter for a number of years and worked very hard at it, was very disciplined at it, was very focused, until one day he decided that he was going to lift a little bit more than maybe he should. And he went beyond his discipline and he blew out his knee. And that was the end of his weightlifting career. That ended. After he got better, the next thing he did is he became a teacher. And he's working very hard doing that right now. And he's right now working on a PhD at the University of Michigan. So we have our disciplines, we do them to the best of our ability. Some of them work out and continue, some of them end. When they end, you pick up your cards and you move to the next table.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. You're a proud dad, and rightly so.
Very much so.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Next up is going to be Kevin and Jean. Kevin.
I got two ones to say. One is sometimes discipline cannot satisfy ourselves, our value, and since the world change faster, our value could be upgrade ourselves. We need to catch up on our way. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is going to be Jean, followed by Laura. Jean.
Yeah, I think it's very different for different people. Like for me, I decided to be an architect when I was.
You got mute. You're on mute.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think it's different for everybody. Like some people figure out early what they want to do and stick with it. Like I decided to be an architect when I was in middle school, and I really enjoy it. I could be, think about possibility being a film director, other more fun things. But your life is limited. You don't really have two choices in life for important career. But as a hobby, I can study psychology. I can study film later. But I think for career, but some other people maybe figure out later. Just like some people dating forever, then they get married, settle down. Some people just first love and settled and married, and they're doing fine too. I think people have different approach.
Wonderful.
Process.
Thank you. Laura, what do you think? Do you think single-minded pursuit impairs potential?
Yeah, I do. And I also think that our college system was really designed for the liberal arts education was designed so people would keep, learn about different things and have open mind, and explore an exploration before they settled on a particular goal. And so I think that we've lost sight of that. We try to turn college into get a job. Nobody can get a job after college because it wasn't designed for that.
Thank you. Next up is Dee.
I think single-minded focusedness is good for people who pursue a specific profession, like Jean has architecture. But I also think that sometimes single-mindedness can create tunnel vision or not a rounded person. So, very often, let's say you're at a cocktail party and, you have this single-minded focused person, and all of the only subject that they can talk about is what they know. Whereas if you are a well-balanced person, you can pick up on, different interactions, and you're able to adapt yourself to your environment, whether it's a social circle, business circle, or, whatever the case may be. So I think, sometimes I think you need a little bit of both.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Dee. Next question. This is from Nick. When does an apprentice graduate to be a master? When do you move from subjugating yourself to the rules to getting ready to challenge them and expand them? How do you know when that point is? Okay, it's going to be, we're going to start with Lowell. Lowell, what do you think? Lowell, you need to unmute.
As someone who worked as an apprentice for a number of years, you get to be a master when your master tells you you are ready to be a master. The master's whole purpose is to train you to get to the point where you can step off the boat on your own, where you can pick up the paintbrush on your own and paint a masterpiece. But you don't, as an apprentice, your object is not to break the traditions which you've been taught. As an apprentice, your job is to learn those traditions, to follow them until you gain the freedom from your master. And he says, now go out there and play in the universe, because that's what masters do.
Wonderful. Great point. There's the story of Verrocchio and Leonardo.
Yes.
So Leonardo worked in Verrocchio's workshop and painted. And then once there is a painting of Verrocchio and Leonardo paints an angel. And that angel is so much higher than anything Verrocchio did that Verrocchio stopped painting at that point. And he says, you all the painting you do, you know.
Right. You've learned it all. You're
Right.
free. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the greatness of Verrocchio is that he said, look, any painting job that comes to the workshop is yours. So you do the painting, because so it's another of my, as we're talking about Leonardo, another of my favorite quotes from Leonardo is that he's a poor student indeed who doesn't excel his master. So, that is the purpose of apprenticeship, to get good and then be able to go beyond whatever tradition that you took in. Next up is going to be Joe, Jean, and Kevin. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of being able to surpass your master is ought to be the master's goal. However, I don't think there's a set formula for this. I often think of, when I think about these scenarios, I think of something like, William Shockley of the semiconductor lab and the treacherous 8 that left with Robert Noyce, and they decided to go start Fairchild Semiconductor. And they turned out to be, their perspective was right, and essentially that's where you have Silicon Valley now. Literally, that was the birth of Silicon Valley. So that you had these 8 guys that really decided to move away from somebody that won a Nobel Prize. So I don't think that there's a really set way to say, whether I should break away or not. And that's the difficulty in this chapter, especially at the end of, the last part of the chapter for me, is that how do you really know when to break the rules? And it's not very clear to me always, because there's a lot of risk involved.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Kind of, it requires like a combination, I think. I don't know this very well, but I think it requires an odd combination of humility and ambition together. Sure. So humility of actually saying, okay, what can you actually do? Just be honest with yourself. Where are you right now? What is it that you can do? What is it that you can't do? So have the humility to actually say, okay, this is where I am. And then the ambition too, of saying that, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. If you can do something, go ahead. Go ahead. Joe.
I think it's one other thing. Naivete. And that is a really critical part of this too. So it's the idea that you can imagine something differently. And that is, and the chances are that you're going to be wrong more than you're going to be right. And that's where it's not a formula.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is that if you're an entrepreneur and you look at the statistics, they're not good. And so that the idea that you're trying this, you know, that's a challenge, you know, so and you're breaking the rules at that point. So.
Excellent. Next up is Jean, followed by Kevin. Jean.
Yeah, I think unfortunately not everybody have a master mentor. I wish I have one, but unfortunately I don't. So like I have to figure out myself, maybe with multiple mentors or with books. So in that case, it's very hard to know when you're the master or something or not. I think it's just like you never know you're old until you see all the people around you are younger. So you don't know you're master until you realize you have to coach other people, even though you haven't figured out everything, but maybe you know enough to figure out most of the things. So I think maybe when you realize you have to mentor others, maybe you're some kind of master in some way.
Thank you, Jean. Next up is Kevin.
Thank you, Shankar. Now I missed our old guest, Barry, right? If you know the Barry, you know, want to see. He got so many interests, you know, drawing, yoga, dance. So it's self-transcendency self is amazing. Everybody want to do or pass their self ability. The second one, from a career perspective, you don't change yourself, the world is going to change you. Either you catch it up or you lose.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Next question is really interesting. This is, you know, what's the relationship between discipline and freedom? Does discipline kill freedom, or does it actually make you free to do things? What is discipline and how is it related to freedom? Right? Ilya, briefly, please. What do you think? Ilya, you need to unmute.
You know what? A lot of people have been saying what I've been thinking, so I put my exclamation down pretty quick. Maybe circle back.
Sure, sounds good. Kevin, Lowell, and Jyoti. Kevin.
Yeah, I would say in order to get freedom, you know, make your discipline work.
Excellent, excellent. Lowell.
Discipline creates freedom. The ability of the opera singer to hit E above high C is because she's had the discipline to practice it 100,000 times. And she doesn't have to worry about it. She has the absolute hardcore knowledge in her mind, in her body, and in her throat that she can hit that note, and she hits it every single time. So discipline, take a look at Derek Jeter. Here's a beautiful example. Every single game he played, before each game, he would take 100 ground balls to the left, to the right, in front of him. Every single game. He can handle any ground ball anywhere on that side of the diamond, and he knows it. That's discipline giving him the freedom to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my favorite example is my favorite singer, Ella Fitzgerald. The thing is that she sings so much in so many different styles for so long. And that is really kind of the part of her as a person. So when she actually starts to sing, she has this incredible freedom. She can pretty much do anything and make everything just sing and just be incredibly beautiful, incredibly new all the time. And that kind of freedom you can't produce without tremendous discipline behind you. So it's like you're building a structure for action. And once you have that structure, you can act in multiple directions. Otherwise, other things are going to interfere with you. Excellent point, Lowell. Next up is Jyoti and Joe. Jyoti.
Yeah, I look at it both ways. It's freedom. Discipline is freedom as well as not freedom. Because if you don't have discipline, you can't, well, let's reverse it. When you have discipline in life, you've gotten yourself to a place where you are satisfied and it is supporting your habits, your passions, and it's bringing you some money that you can play around with. So in that case, yes, it brings you freedom. When it doesn't bring you freedom is when in the back of your mind, you always think that you have a potential and you are not willing to give up your this primary goal that you have achieved to pursue the secondary potential, and you're afraid that you might not be successful in your secondary, so you just keep adhering to your first goal, and then your circumstances in life also become such that you cannot deviate. So it's both ways. Yes, freedom, you're happier because of the what it brings for you, and not so happy when you think there is something else you could have pursued too.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Joe, Ray, Jean, Ilya, and Mike. Joe.
Yeah, I kind of think it's both as well, as the idea that if you have a set value, and let's just take the Derek Jeter example, or where you take 1,000 round balls before, he knew what the value was that he was going for after that. He knew what he had to do in order to achieve. So discipline to him was critical. It was a set of values. Where it can be debilitating is when you become too rigid and not open enough to listen to different ideas or thoughts, or in pursuing something that maybe not so set in value, like where it's not as clear, where the goal isn't as clear. And a lot of entrepreneurs start out that way. The goals are not very clear. So if you're overly disciplined and only focused on one particular thing, you're unable to pivot and maybe make a decision that will actually end up allowing you to be successful. And I think that that's where discipline can be debilitating in certain cases.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Next up is Ray, followed by Jean. Ray.
Thank you. I would certainly fully agree with what Joe just mentioned. What comes to my mind is Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, the 10,000-hour rule in terms of discipline. It takes 10,000 hours of intensive practice to achieve mastery of complex skills and materials, like playing the violin or getting as good as Bill Gates or sports figures that we've talked about tonight. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ray. Next up is going to be Jean, Ilya, and Mike. Jean.
Yeah, I have to show a different opinion. I'm reading the book Range. So range actually the opposite idea compared to the 1,000 hours idea. Mm-hmm. So it's like people have different type of way of learning. Some people, like they mentioned, the chess or golf, this like particular game, very set rules. Repetitive practice actually the way to get it. But like tennis or other soccer is a different game. This tennis player, he didn't train as a tennis player. He was young, he was being all kind of things. He also become a champion. So I think it's a balance, so it's different approach. It's like you see this guy is so disciplined, was play 1,000 hours. Maybe he's in the flow. He didn't feel disciplined at all. He's just obsessed doing it. So I think it's a balance, find your own way. Whatever works.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jean. Next up is Ilya, followed by Mike. Ilya.
What you do is important not only to you but to others. So when you find something that you feel you need discipline, as someone has mentioned before, there are two reasons to do that: to make money or to personally develop. It comes down to freedom and the lack of control that someone else has on your life. Okay. And the only way to claim that freedom is by creatively intuiting what you want.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilya. Next up is Mike. Mike, 30 seconds. The question is, what is the relationship between discipline and freedom?
The universe, the society, and your area of interest, and the nature of your task and your skill set set the boundaries and the initial conditions and your state space that you're working in. So it might take 10, and you have freedom to work within that state space, and that may be, may say that you're ready to go in 10 minutes, or 5 million hours is not enough, or maybe even the task is impossible.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Next up is going to be the question of Claire. How do you choose what one thing to work on? How do you choose what to work on?
I feel like I answered that already.
Okay, so no, this is a question for anybody who wants to answer it. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Dave.
You know, I'll take a stab at that. I think it's what turns you on, what interests you, but I think you may have a goal in life. They always say, you know, find a need and fill it is a way to be a success in life. And obviously, I think as people said, it can change. I have a wonderful mail carrier, nice Asian man. Hadn't seen for a while. For several months, you know, about the time we had the change and knew a director, whatever, thought, well, maybe he's on a new route or whatever. Saw him yesterday. His mother had been in a coma for 5 months and she finally passed. Well, for the last, 6 months, he had a focus in his life. So you just have to be flexible.
Thank you. Jyoti, how do you choose what to work on?
Well, like Dave said, what turns you on? Whatever your passion is, and if you have 4 or 5 passions coming at the same time, then you need to devote time for each one of them in the beginning to see where you stand with them. And sometimes you think you are very interested in music, and when you pursue little music, you say, it's not what I thought it was. And art, same thing, or teaching, or what have you. So you have to give yourself a fair chance to try all those passions for a little bit to decide which one you want. That's it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is going to be Jean, Joe, and Laura. Jean.
Yeah, I think to choose it, you have to analyze what your passion is, what your strength is, and also how that can, and your personality, and how that fit in with the needs from society. Like you want to do something fun, but also you have to contribute to others so they can pay you to have fun. Otherwise you have your own fun, nobody pay you. So in order to make a living, so I told my kids, find something you love to do and make value for other people. Then they will pay you to enjoy your life.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jean. Next up is Joe, followed by Laura. Joe.
I have a bit of an unconventional way of looking at this in the sense that I really do think that your passion finds you, but you have to accept it and you have to like essentially go after it. So in other words, it's something that that speaks to you and it makes you feel good and you understand what it is. But then you have to decide how are you going to achieve and fulfill that passion. And I think that that's how I look at it a little bit differently.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Laura.
Wait a second. Sorry.
So I look at
it. No, I look at it like, what sort of do you feel at your core? Is most important to you, and not only to you individually, but what you see socially. It would be important to work on. And find what that is, look for it and find it and go after it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Laura. All right, folks. So what I want to do is I want to first ask you how we did. So I'm going to run a poll very quickly on what, let me see, how did we do today? So what part, I'm launching the poll. If you can, in the first part, you can choose as many as you want.
I can't vote.
Oh, you can't vote? Okay, I'll go ahead and take you away, take your permissions away so you can vote. Can you vote now? Nope. Okay, too bad, too bad. So I'll take your vote as a positive vote.
Positive for all of them.
Okay, wonderful. So we got 3 out of 20 voting. So just let us know how this meetup was overall. Was it excellent, good, okay, poor? Let us know for each of them, initial presentation parts, the breakout room parts, and the final part, the takeaways and lightning round. And just because I'm trying to keep, I try to keep improving these things, try to get feedback, I try to listen to everybody and see what it is. It's up to 11. While we're doing that, while people are voting, let me tell you, on Saturday, Saturday and Sunday, I've got some incredible meetups. Saturday at 12 o'clock, Dr. Brian McVeigh is going to be back. He's spent 17 years in Japan, and he's going to be talking about development of psychological concepts in Japan. At 2:30 is one of my favorite meetups. That's the Louis Sullivan meetup, which is incredible. Don't miss that. At 5 o'clock, we are going to do another presentation on Julian Jaynes, and the most interesting topic. Bill Rowe is going to be here, and he's going to be making a very thorough presentation on how consciousness develops in children from infant to about 4 or 5, the early stage. What is actually going on in there? So if you're curious, don't miss that. On Sunday at 2:30, we're going to be talking about the trivium. Trivium, that is grammar, dialectics, and rhetoric, form the base of all Western education for over 2,000 years. And this is going to be a presentation on the PhD thesis of Marshall McLuhan, whom we have been studying quite a bit. He has incredible commentary on the trivium. So that's going to be, Peter Berkman is going to be here, who has spent about 5 years studying that. And then at 5 o'clock, Aiden is going to be back, and he's going to be talking about comparing kind of the dream or fantasy thinking with directed thinking. So that's what is coming up on the weekend. So let me go ahead and share the results of this poll with everybody. Let's see. Where is this? What parts you like the breakout rooms? Very good. Breakout rooms. I'm glad to see 79% on the breakout rooms. The moderators, you guys must be doing a very good job, or facilitators, you've been doing a good job. Overall, it was between excellent and good. Presentation was excellent to good. Breakout rooms were more excellent than that. And the final round was good. All right. Wonderful. Thank you very much, folks. And we will see you soon. Next Thursday is going to be next rule, and there are meetups every day. So see you soon. Bye. Bye, everybody.